in order to load a case, what we are going to do is remove the spent primer and size the case back to the original dimensions that it began life as a new cartridge, or a new case rather. We are going to replace the primer in the case. We're going to load a new powder charge into the case, and the last thing we will do is seat a bullet to have a completely reloaded or hand-loaded cartridge of ammunition. The basic process of hand loading your own ammunition starts with inspecting your cases. Before you do anything else, you want to look at these, particularly under bright light. Make sure you don't see any cracks, any major defects in the case, any bright rings or signs of head separation back here near the base of the case, and just make sure that your casing is safe to hand load. Again, this will be spelled out very well in your hand loading manuals when you buy those, along with the equipment you need to get started. Once we've inspected all of our cases, the first operation we're going to need to do is resize these cases. And I want to stress this is basic hand loading information. There are many steps that are used by different people to try to craft the ammunition they want specifically to a firearm or to perform a specific task. What I am going over is the basic method of hand loading ammunition. In order to resize this casing and to remove the fired primer, we are going to use our use our press to run the case up into our resizing die. This will simultaneously remove the fired cartridge. In order to do this operation, we're going to need a case lube. I like this RCBS case lube because it's water soluble. I can basically go back through after I have sized all my casings and wipe these off with a wet rag and remove the case lube. All I'm going to do is put a little of this on my thumb and forefinger. I'm just going to rub it on the outside of the casing. You have to be a little careful. You don't want to get too much of the case lube on the casing. If so, when you run it inside of the die, it'll start to dent the casing just from the pressure of that lube being forced against the die. We are dealing with a lot of pressure inside of these reloading presses and in the dies. You want to make sure that you're wearing eye protection as you're doing this, because if something lets go, it's going to be moving at a high rate of speed, and it's probably going to be a small piece of metal. You don't want to get that stuck in your eye. I also have this brush which has got some case lube on it, and I'm going to run that just inside of the case neck, just to lubricate the inside of that neck a little bit so that it works well. There is on the decapping pin, there is a ball inside this die that expands the case mouth. That little bit of lubricant on the case mouth will help it move over top of that ball a lot more easily. We're then going to place the casing on the shell holder, and we're going to run it up inside of the resizing die. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but the fired primer just popped off, and when I pull it down out of there, I now have a properly resized case that's going to be ready for the next operation. Once you've sized all your cases, and assuming that they don't need to be trimmed or have any other operations done to them, the next thing we're going to do is replace the primer that was fired the last time the case was used. There are a variety of different tools that are used for this operation. I am going to be doing it with my press. There are some people who don't do it this way. I do it just basically for convenience. I already have everything set up and I can just run it through the press quickly. So there are hand tools and different things that are used. I'm just going to use the press. All I'm going to do is raise the arm far enough to be able to insert the primer arm. I've already placed a primer in this small cup. Push this forward, and when I lower the press, I will feel the primer start to engage the primer pocket in the case, and then I just push so that it seats, and we now have a new seated primer in the base of the case. You do this, of course, for each and every piece of brass that you're hand loading. The next step in our hand loading process is to replace the powder charge in our casing. I use a PACT powder dispenser and scale combo for this particular operation. You don't have to use something like this. You can get by perfectly well with the plain balance beam type scale. It might take a little bit longer. And I would recommend that no matter what tool you ultimately use to dispense your powder charges, you do have a good balance beam scale to double check your digital scale. From time to time, you may get a strange reading on your digital scale, or you might start to wonder about its accuracy. To be able to verify it on your balance beam scale is very handy. Once we have weighed out the proper powder charge of the proper powder, we're going to place that in the casing. In this case, I'm putting 24 grains of Varget into this 556 case. What I typically do is weigh out a number of charges and put them in the cases. Then, with the cases all arranged, I look at them under a strong light and make sure that none of them is notably higher or lower than any of the other powder charges, to make sure I haven't somehow inadvertently put more powder in one or less in another. It's just a fail-safe that I do to double check my cases. The last operation that we have is seating a bullet. Once you have your charged casing, all you need to do is place it back onto your shell holder. I have the bullet here in my hand. I am going to place that in the die. By the way, this is a match reloading die. A lot of them don't have the cutout on the side. You actually have to hold the bullet underneath as you run it up into the die. In any case, run it into the die, which seats the bullet, and you now have a new loaded cartridge of ammunition to be able to fire in your firearm. Now, one thing you might have picked up on through the course of this demonstration is the time aspect. Along with the financial outlay to be able to buy all your equipment, you have to decide if you're going to hand load your own ammunition, if you are going to be able to invest the time to be able to actually load up as many rounds as you're going to need to fire. That's an individual decision that everybody's going to have to make for themselves. For me, this is a good wintertime activity for me, to be able to sit down here when it's too cold and snowy to do anything outside, and I will load literally thousands of rounds of ammunition. Not everybody is able to do that, but if you are able to do it and you are willing to put out the necessary funds to be able to purchase your equipment, you can actually hand load very good ammunition specifically tailored to your firearms for less money than you would be able to buy that comparable factory ammunition. Hope you found this demonstration useful. Hope it's been informative. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. Other than that, see you next time, and good shooting.